I am here at the Staten Island Courthouse, as you can see, the Richmond County Courthouse in Staten Island, with Sujata Gibson, who is an attorney on more than one major case involving New York City's vaccine mandates. Do you want to explain what happened here today at the hearing?
Sure. Thanks for having me. We are here today on oral arguments for a motion to dismiss for a new state court filing, DiCapua v. City of New York. This is new in state court, but these claims were already filed in federal court back in January of 2022. The district court and federal court, that was in the Kane v. de Blasio matter. The district court decided not to exercise what's called supplemental jurisdiction over the state law claims. So we brought them in state court, and this is a proposed class action lawsuit here in state court on behalf of all DOE employees.
So the city was trying to argue to dismiss the case today.
Yes, they'd like to dismiss the case, so they filed a motion to dismiss. The judge is going to reserve on that. He heard some arguments today, and we will be back in any event next week or on June 2nd, which is a Friday at noon, to argue whether this should be a class action lawsuit or not. So that is a big argument, and one that I hope those who are affected can come out.
How many named plaintiffs are there, or petitioners are there in this case?
14.
14.
And then there's 15th named petitioner, which is the organizational plaintiff, Teachers for Choice.
And then, so if it does become a class action lawsuit, what will that mean to people who are not named plaintiffs? Who will be affected by that?
So that will mean that everyone will have the opportunity who qualifies, and the judge will decide whether there's subcategories or, all DOE employees who were denied accommodation, or whether there's any narrowing or carve out. But if this is established as a class action lawsuit, then presumably anyone who is denied reasonable religious accommodation by the DOE or the citywide panel who is a DOE employee would qualify.
Right. You have other news about another case that you're going to be working on, which last time I was at this courthouse, it was for the decision given by Judge Ralph Porzio, who was also the judge that we were before today in the hearing, and that was the decision in the Garvey case involving the 16 New York sanitation workers. He decided in their favor, and that case is now going to appeals. The city has appealed that decision. You have an announcement about that.
I do. So CHD has decided to support this appeal. They feel that it's very important, and I agree, and they're going to be supporting me joining the lawsuit as well as co-counsel with Chad LaValia, who's done an amazing job. So we're going to be working as co-counsel so that he has backup and manpower to do this. He has really won an outstanding decision, so I'm very excited to be working with him and with the historic plaintiffs in that case. It's a landmark case. It's very important, and it could be big. If it were to win at the appellate division, it would set precedent that would help everybody.
Because that case, the Garvey case, really overturned the mandate. It invalidated the mandate as being unconstitutional under the New York State Constitution. However, the petitioners who won and all of the other affected workers did not go back to work because of the appeal, because there was a stay put on the effects of that decision, right?
That's right, yes. It won on several grounds in the lower court, actually, all of which are important. One of them was that it's irrational to mandate a vaccine that can't stop transmission, and that, it doesn't really make sense as a workplace requirement, because you have people getting off of a subway where nobody's vaccinated and then coming to work by themselves, and yet they can't they can't work because they're unvaccinated, whereas, there's all these bizarre carve-outs for athletes and entertainers singers and strippers and makeup artists that it just didn't make any sense. And I think Judge Porzio did a great job of illustrating that. The decision also really puts a curb on the local Department of Health's ability to set employment conditions or to interfere in the lives of New Yorkers in this very invasive way without express authorization or permission.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any sense of because those, as you said, those workers have not actually been reinstated or received any back pay because of the stay that was put on that decision? Do you have any sense of what the timeline for the appeals process will be?
Well, the city has to perfect their appeal by June 26th. We will have responsive briefs that are due 30 days later. And we're going to try to push to get this heard sooner rather than later. This is a critical issue, and we're exploring whether any other kind of court action needs to take place because we are very aware of the suffering that people are enduring while this drags on. And it is unconscionable, really. Especially, the city has ended the mandate now, but they won't rehire people unless they sign a waiver of their right to sue. So that is particularly shocking, and I think something that needs to be addressed right away.
Okay, would you also like to touch on another case that you're working on? Because you're working on the state level on a case that affects healthcare workers as well. And you mentioned before that you work with CHD, which is Children's Health Defense, and they're backing certain cases that are major cases. And I believe that the healthcare worker case is one of those that you're also working on with that support from CHD. Do you want to talk about what's going on with that case?
Sure. I should mention this case is also in partnership with CHD. But the healthcare worker case is Medical Professionals for Informed Consent v. Hochul, or v. Bassett, excuse me. That is the case that we won in the Supreme Court Onondaga County, overturning the healthcare workers vaccine mandate issued by the New York State Department of Health. And the state has appealed, and we fully briefed the issue, and we're now going to have oral arguments next Wednesday on the 24th in Rochester at the Appellate Division 4th Department.
Okay. Any other news that you'd like to let New Yorkers who are following this issue know about?
This isn't over. We're fighting. CHD is fighting. A lot of attorneys are fighting. We're not going to give up. We're going to keep exhausting these potential remedies and fighting for justice. And, the dominoes are falling. In these state court cases, for example, there's been over 40 individual decisions at this point holding that the citywide panel has issued these arbitrary and capricious determinations denying religious accommodation that do not comply with the state constitution. They do not comply with the federal constitution. They don't comply with their obligations under the New York State or New York State human rights law. And the cases are mounting at this point. It would be very difficult for the city to argue that this isn't a systemic class-wide problem. And so that's why we're bringing this class action lawsuit, because, we could continue to do them one at a time, but people lack the resources to each hire a lawyer and have, it's inefficient for the courts to have to hear them one after the other. So I think it really is high time that we have a class action lawsuit to address this head on and say, look, what happened is unconstitutional, unlawful, and arbitrary and capricious, and these people need to be reinstated and go back to work.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to seeing you again on June 2nd.
See you on June 2nd.
For that hearing.
Hope you can come out. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
I'm here with Stephanie DiCapua outside the Staten Island Courthouse, the Richmond County Courthouse, and you are the lead named petitioner in a lawsuit that is a proposed class action lawsuit against the city. You were a teacher. Do you want to explain a little bit about what your background was in your work?
Yeah, sure. So I was teaching phys ed at PS 36. I had just gotten tenure the year before. I had been working for the DOE, so I guess it would have been my 5th year. I loved teaching. I loved the students. If I talk about it too much, I'll get emotional. But yeah, I I loved it, and what happened to us was just extremely unfortunate. And that's why I'm here today, fighting for what's right.
Can you explain a little bit what did happen to you?
Yeah, so basically, I remember it was the end of August, and we got word that they were going to be putting in a vaccine mandate, and I never get vaccines. I've always sincerely felt that they're not for me. I have sincerely held religious beliefs against it, and I immediately filed for a religious exemption. I thought, of course, this is going to be accepted. I even had endorsement from my church. They wrote a letter, and then I was denied without an explanation. It was left blank of why I was denied, and I appealed. Was never given an appeal hearing. And then I was put on leave without pay starting October 4th of 2021. And then I'm also part of the Kane versus de Blasio lawsuit as a named plaintiff, and that's still ongoing. And recently we filed this DiCapua versus City of New York as the Article 78, and we're here. That's why we're here today. So.
Why did you decide to pursue legal action?
Because sometimes you have to just stand up for what's right. It's like that saying, if you stand for nothing, you fall for anything. And it wasn't just about what's right for me. It's about standing up for what's right for everyone. Because this affected so many people. And especially with this lawsuit being a class action, I just think it's so important because it can affect so many people who were wronged. And I think it also sets an example. And like I said, how I love my students, I couldn't in good conscience not stand up for what I felt was right because I'm supposed to be a role model. So sometimes you have to do things that are hard, but sometimes the hardest things are what's right. So.
What are you hoping the outcome to be for yourself personally?
Personally? Maybe just some relief. It was a really hard 2 years. I'm one of the lucky ones that I have a fantastic job now. Not teaching, but I do have a great job at a great company, and I'm blessed in that. But the 2 years before this were not easy. It was mentally really hard. And it was probably one of the hardest few years of my life, to be honest. So maybe even just some compensation for that. And I more want this case to work for everybody else. Whether or not I want to be reinstated, it's more important that how this is affecting everyone else, that they deserve the opportunity to have their jobs back. And that's how I feel about it.
How did it take you a long time to find another position after you were terminated? Because there were mandates in place for not only the public sector that you worked in, but also private sector employees. I know it was difficult for a lot of people to get back on their feet.
I've always just been kind of a fighter in that sense, where I guess I'm scrappy, and when I have to make money, I do. And I would say I worked a lot of cash jobs initially, and then when it was official that the DOE was not budging on this and not offering any kind of accommodation, I started seeking other job opportunities, and I got really lucky, and I did. I found a great place, and I'm happy there. And like I said, I think I'm blessed in that. But it wasn't the easiest. But I don't know. You do what you have to do when you're in that position. So we got through it, or I got through it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you'd like New Yorkers who don't really know much about the mandate situation and that it's still affecting people's lives and there are still ongoing court cases? Is there anything that you'd like to let them know about?
Well, I think it's easy when something isn't directly affecting you to not pay attention to it. So there are thousands of people that this affected, and it even affected the people who had to get vaccinated against what they wanted to do, who are still working there. And they have to live with that every day. They were forced for their livelihoods to do something that they didn't want to do. So it didn't just affect the people who didn't get it. That's the other thing to consider. It affected even the people who did and didn't want to get it. And just, it's really hard, I think, for someone to wrap their head around, to imagine that your job that you do every day and you do it well can just be ripped away from you because of a belief that you have to not inject yourself with something you don't want to. And it's crazy to think, sometimes every day, it's crazy for me to think that really happened. It's just, I think I was in shock for a really long time, and now it is hitting me more and more that was real.
Tell me again how long you taught.
I taught 8 years. It would have been 9, I think, and it was 5 in the DOE.
And why did you go into that?
Into teaching?
Yeah.
Because I loved it. I loved the kids. My mom was a teacher. I first actually taught in Australia. It was something I just always knew I wanted to do. And I was good at it too. It came easy. I loved it. And I guess that's why I get emotional, because I really did. Like, the kids were the best part. They really were the best part. And that was the hardest part of this whole thing, was feeling like you're walking away from them. But I just had to remind myself that, like I said, you have to stand up for what's right for you and set that example and show your students that you're standing up for what's right. Because I hope that for them too. And I remember at the time thinking that I was just a gateway to get to the kids, and that they would be next, and they might be forced to get a vaccine, or parents might be forced to give them a vaccine they don't want to. And I just felt like I had to do what I thought was right. And I felt like laying down and not being true to myself and my beliefs, that it wouldn't have been the right thing. And I wouldn't have been proud of myself if I did that. So,
I am Trinidad Smith. I worked for D75 school, which is a special education division of the DOE. I was at my site for 20 years. I worked with kids with autism, and it was against my religious beliefs and convictions to follow the mandate, and therefore I was let go back in February. So I've been fighting with on the Michael Caine case. It started with against de Blasio in the city of New York, and now it's Adams in the city of New York, obviously. So that's where we're at now. And then this is a second case, actually, which is the Article 78 case that we're fighting here. And so there's actually 2 cases right now.
So why did you decide to pursue legal action?
Because they took my livelihood from me, and it's unconstitutional what they did. I'm not just going to give away 20 years that I dedicated to an organization and a corporation that isn't going to have my back. So it's worth it to me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's a long process, though. Yeah.
Yep, it's been going on the second school year out of work, but I feel like we all knew that it was not going to be an easy ride or a short ride. So I'm in it for the long haul, no matter how long it takes. And I don't think a lot of people were willing to. There were a lot of people that did not want to vax, didn't want to follow the mandates, but in the very end, right before the deadline, they all vaxxed. So, I just think that I'm fighting so that, this isn't going to be as easily done to us in the future.
How have things been done? When were you terminated from the Department of Education?
Back in February of 21.
February 21, okay. Mm-hmm. So what has happened
That's
your
when
life
I was
since?
fully terminated, when they took us off the bus. But we actually only worked the first month of September, and then we actually, October 4th, I believe it was when we were not allowed to come back. And then they gave us a little time to be on paid leave with medical insurance. And then in February, you had to sign away your medical insurance and everything.
So what happened for you after that? Were you able to find other work?
I have done a few things. They didn't really work out, so it's a large income that I lost, so I can't just go work for any little job or anything. I'm self-sufficient and support my 15-year-old son, and so it's been a little difficult, but I'm sticking it through, and I believe that God has my back.
You did a very challenging job. You're talking about working in a school for children with special needs. And that's not every teacher is even cut out for that. That's a very challenging field.
It was, but I just had a knack for it. I liked it, so I wasn't going anywhere until I retired. I was going to stay there. And then you're right, it has a large turnover. There's a lot of young teachers there because people get, a little fed up, or they just get burned out and they want to go, maybe do another profession or do another classification that isn't as challenging. But it's rewarding.
Is that something that you expect to be able to get back to?
Yeah, I definitely would like to go back. And I didn't have write-ups. I didn't have anything in my file. I had a perfect record, up until that happened. So there would be no reason for me not to go back. And I know that, I'm going to probably, not everybody's going to be happy that, see us back, but that's life. It wasn't easy for us. We've struggled these 2 years, so I haven't been home eating bonbons or anything. We've definitely, every month is a struggle for all of us. So I just want everyone to know it hasn't been easy.
Is there anything else you'd like to say to other New Yorkers who don't know a lot about this issue?
I just hope that they know that we're fighting for everybody, because our ruling is going to help everybody maintain their religious and medical rights to choose, and that really is our focus, to continue to give us our constitutional rights.
All right. Thank you for talking with me.
Thank you.